Hi, my name is Autumn Dickson, and this week is May 25th through the 31st of the Come Follow Me program associated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And this week we are studying Judges chapters 2 through 4, 6 through 8, and 13 through 16. Now, Judges was a time period where there was no real leadership over Israel. There wasn't a monarchy. They didn't have a centralized prophet. It is a time marked with apostasy and partial restoration. And when the Israelites would go and get themselves in trouble because they weren't following the Lord would send a judge to help. It's what he called it. It's called a judge. And this judge was often a charismatic military leader, and they would come and basically help Israel. There were judges who were major judges, and they would save all of Israel. And then there were minor judges that would help regions of Israel. And Gideon, one of the people that we read about this week, was one of those regional judges. So he helped save Manasseh, Ephraim, Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali. And Gideon is awesome to read about because he was a judge who was called, but Gideon also struggled with his faith. He would struggle with his faith and he would ask the Lord for signs, and the Lord would respond in mercy, which is really interesting because there are other times in the scriptures that we read where people ask for signs and it doesn't go very well for them. So I think of right after the Red Sea, the Israelites went to Moses and they're like, give us a sign that you are still favored by God. Not to mention the sign that they had just been given, but they would challenge Moses and complain. And so the place was named, that place where they challenged Moses and complained to him, it was named Massah. And it was named Massah because it was a memorial to their lack of faith. Then we read about Zechariah, who the Lord told him he would have a son, and he didn't believe it and laughed about it because his wife was old, and he became a mute because of it. And then, of course, there's Thomas the Apostle, and he had a lack of faith, and he was rebuked for it. We read again and again about people who will approach the Lord with a lack of faith or ask for a sign, and it doesn't go very well for them. So it's especially interesting that Gideon received multiple signs from the Lord, not just one, but multiple signs. So the angel comes to Gideon and he's like, you got a job. And Gideon's like, hold on. And he runs back to his house and he brings everything. He brings out these offerings, essentially, and he puts it on a rock and the angel burns it all up. Sign number one. And then Gideon's like, okay, forgive me if this is too much, but can I have another sign? And he puts some fleece out and he says, when I wake up, please let the fleece be wet and the ground be dry. Goes very well. And then the next day, he's like, okay, now next sign, please let the blanket or the fleece be dry and the ground around it be wet. Goes really well. And then another sign is Gideon is standing with his 300 soldiers to go and fight off the Midianites, who were the ones who were antagonizing the regions in Israel at this time. This time, Gideon didn't even ask for a sign. The Lord came to Gideon and was like, hey, if you're feeling a little bit nervous, you should go spy on the Midianites and see what happens. So Gideon goes and spies on the Midianites. And as he is spying on the Midianites, there's two of them. And one of them, well, there's a lot of them, but Gideon's spying on two of them. One of them talks about how he has this dream that a barley loaf came and flattened a tent. And his companion interprets this dream as Gideon coming with the Israelites and completely defeating the Midianites. Here's how Gideon responds. So this is Judges chapter 7, verse 15. And it was so, when Gideon heard the telling of the dream and the interpretation thereof, that he worshipped and returned into the host of Israel and said, arise, for the Lord hath delivered into your hand the host of Midian. They hadn't won any battles yet, but Gideon came forward and he's rejoicing and he's like, we've won. The Lord is on our side. And so Gideon was given a lot of signs to help his faith along. And he was encouraged. And that last sign he didn't even ask for. It was just given to him. And when you think about the fact that the Lord gave it to him in a really powerful way, the Lord could have sent that dream to Gideon, but instead he gave that dream to a Midianite. Imagine how much more powerful that was for Gideon to go and not question himself, oh, I got this dream, is it just wishful thinking? But to go and hear a Midianite interpreting the dream as that they were going to be defeated by Gideon. So why did Gideon receive multiple signs while others were rebuked? There's probably a lot of reasons for that, and that is because the Lord works according to our circumstances. His response is often in direct correlation with the circumstance. And so it's going to vary according to a lot of reasons. It's going to vary as much as the circumstances vary. But I want to talk about two potential reasons why the Lord chose to respond in mercy to Gideon, because it can teach us about how we should approach the Lord. So number one, number one reason why the Lord potentially gave so many signs to Gideon. The Lord was wise enough to know that Gideon needed a relationship with him. Gideon's father had an altar, a Baal altar, which was an idol. His family was obviously into idolatry. It begs the question, how much did Gideon really know about God? We know that he had some knowledge of God because he references the deliverance in Egypt, but how much had he experienced God, personally experienced God? Because there's a difference. You can know facts about God and not have any experiences with him, and those facts fall flat. The Lord knew that Gideon needed a reason to trust him when he hadn't had many experiences with him previously. The Lord knew Gideon, but did Gideon know the Lord? The Lord doesn't want blind, obedient dogs. He doesn't want us to just go rushing in because someone came and told us to do something. He wants to have a true, honest, powerful relationship with us. And so this idea that Gideon wasn't just running headfirst because an angel came and, hey, you should do this. He didn't just blow caution to the wind and run headfirst into danger. It's not a sign that he was faithless. It was likely an indication that he did not yet know what the truth was and what he needed to be doing. He didn't know the Lord. So what does this teach us about our own lives and approaching the Lord? It teaches us that the Lord does not begrudge us the time it takes to learn how to trust him. There may come a time when he's like, hey, I've given you a lot of signs. You need to decide whether you're going to trust me or not. But he doesn't begrudge us that time of building that trust. He allows us to approach him and collect these encounters with him so that we can understand his character and know that we can rely on him and know that when he asks us to run headfirst into fighting the Midianites with just 300 people, we're going to be willing to do it because we understand him. When we look at David, before David ever fought Goliath, he fought off 2 wild animals. When we look at Moses, Moses had a very fragile faith in God in the beginning. When Pharaoh's like, no, I'm not releasing your people. In fact, I'm giving them more work. Moses kind of loses it a little bit. Why? Why did you send me? Why are you doing this? It's awful. His faith was very fragile in the beginning too. But after having lots of encounters with the Lord, his faith grows tremendously, to the point where he's able to turn to the Israelites and be like, have faith, the Lord's going to deliver you. And he does this in the face of certain death, even though the plan for that salvation has not yet been revealed to him. The Old Testament often gives us a front row seat to watching people experience the Lord and grow in their trust of him. Now, the Lord knew that Gideon needed these experiences. He didn't just expect Gideon to trust this essentially stranger. Now, put that into contrast with this idea of a stranger coming up to you and saying, trust me. And you look at him and you're like, why? And he responds with, because I said so. What? You don't necessarily hate that person or are wary of that person immediately, but hopefully you're also not giving them your darkest secrets or your social security number. The Lord understands that he is a stranger to us. He's the one who put the veil there. He doesn't want blind, obedient dogs who just run after anything anyone tells them to do. For all Gideon knew, that angel was a demon from Satan. He knows that we need to build experiences with him before we run into danger after him. He wants us to wisely and consciously choose him. And so he gave Gideon experiences, and he was patient. Honestly, even as he was guiding Israel along and they were learning these difficult lessons, he was still patient with Israel. They were still his people. He was patient with Moses as Moses developed his faith. Patience is not a problem for him. It's not difficult. If the Lord seems impatient, it's because it's going to be a benefit to the person he's working with. It is likely trying to get their attention and get them moving. Reason two, why Gideon got so many signs where others usually were only rebuked. It is because Gideon had a soft heart. The Lord gave him lots of signs because Gideon was willing. Over and over and over in the scriptures, you find examples of how the Lord replies with intensity when it's a hard heart, and how he responds with mercy and encouragement towards a soft heart. Here's a verse. Judges chapter 6, verse 17. So this is one of the ways that Gideon asked for a sign. And he said unto him, so Gideon said to the angel, if now I have found grace in thy sight, then show me a sign that thou talkest with me. He approaches it so humbly. He's not like, give me a sign or I'm not doing anything. He goes and he says, if I found grace, essentially in the sight of the Lord, help me know it. And then we get to read more about Gideon, knowing his heart is soft. The angel gives him the sign, and immediately Gideon builds an altar to the God of Israel. And that night he goes and destroys the altar of Baal. This happens over and over and over again. He approaches God with humility and says, please, can I have this sign? And then he follows through. He is willing to follow after truth and peace and power just as soon as he knows that's what he's following. He just wants to make sure he's going in the right direction first. And then he has a soft heart that's willing to do whatever's being asked of him. When we close our heart off to following truth and power and peace, when we're saying we're not willing, that is when the Lord finds reason to shake the earth to get our attention. When we look at past experiences where the Lord responded with intensity, so like with the Egyptians, they got a lot of plagues and they had a lot of difficulty and they were drowned in the sea because they did not have a soft heart that was willing to follow after truth and peace and power. Even though they had these crazy signs right in front of their eyes, they weren't soft-hearted, and the Lord responded with intensity. When we look at the city of Jericho, Rahab was the only one who was saved because she was willing to follow after the God of Israel. The rest of them just closed up their doors and got scared. None of them paused to wonder, well, maybe there's something here. None of them were willing to open their eyes and wonder if they should be following the God of Israel. Gideon asked for signs humbly, and he also was incredibly willing to follow through, which made it very easy for the Lord to be willing to encourage him along. I testify that the Lord responds in wisdom. No matter how he is choosing to work with certain individuals, it's always in his infinite wisdom and love. He knows what he's doing. I testify that he doesn't condemn us when we need reassurance if we are willing to follow him. And honestly, even when we do have a hard heart and we struggle to follow him, his intensity to try and work through our hard heart, his intensity is also not a sign of condemnation. Actually, it's a sign that he loves us and wants to reach us. However, he is working with you in your life. Take it as a sign that he loves you. I'm grateful for his wisdom and his willingness to train me and lead me along purposefully and deliberately. And I say that in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.